Hello and welcome to Waste Regulations and Development. This module is brought to you by the Kentucky Environmental Compliance Assistance Program, which is part of the Energy and Environment Cabinet. In the mid-20th century, solid waste management issues rose to new heights of public concern. This was due to increasing solid waste generation, shrinking disposal capacity, rising disposal costs, and the opposition to the siting of new disposal facilities. So why do we even have waste regulations in the first place? Simply put, people were making more waste with fewer places to put it, and it was costing more to dispose of. This combination of factors created a dangerous situation, and there were some key events that helped spur the creation of much-needed waste regulations. The first occurred with the Love Canal project near Niagara Falls, New York. Designed to be a canal that provided hydroelectric power for the area, the project was abandoned, and between the 1920s and 1953, 21,000 tons of hazardous chemicals were dumped into the canal. The project was abandoned. In the mid-50s, the canal was covered, sold, and developed into a residential area, complete with a school. By the 1970s, residents were suffering from cancer and other severe health problems. They noticed foul odors and chemical residues. The area was evacuated in 1978. Waste regulations would also have saved Times Beach, Missouri. In 1971, a waste disposal company used waste oil contaminated with dioxin to spray dirt roads in local horse arenas to keep dust down. Attendees at the arenas suffered immediate health problems, such as headaches, nosebleeds, abdominal pains, skin conditions, and there were even dead horses. The top 18 inches of soil were removed and dumped on designated properties. Even so, dioxin persisted at the arenas. The CDC investigated the site but believed the dioxin wouldn't persist long term. However, the Environmental Protection Agency found that the soil was still contaminated, as were 90 buried drums, some of which contained dioxin. The town was completely evacuated early in 1983 due to a dioxin contamination. It has since been turned into a state park. As of 2012, no significant health risks exist. This example is more recent and hits close to home. The Valley of the Drums is a 23-acre toxic waste site in northern Bullitt County, Kentucky. This site became a collection point for toxic wastes starting in the 1960s. In 1966, it caught the attention of state officials when some of the drums caught fire and burned for more than a week. However, at that time, there were no laws to address the storage or containment of toxic waste, and the site continued to be unregulated for another decade. In 1978, a state investigation of the property revealed over 100,000 drums, a quarter of which were buried, with the remainder being discharged directly into pits and trenches. In 1979, the EPA responded by analyzing the contaminants and beginning emergency cleanup, focusing on the worst drums and worst areas. Full cleanup began in 1983 and lasted until 1990. The site is routinely monitored and inspected. More barrels were even found in 2008, but this site is still not ready for use. The Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA, is the nation's primary law regulating hazardous waste. RCRA amended the Solid Waste Disposal Act of 1965 and was passed in 1976. The Act set national goals for protecting human health and the environment from the potential hazards of waste disposal, conserving energy and natural resources, reducing the amount of waste generated, and ensuring that wastes are managed in a sound manner. To achieve the goals set forth by the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, 3 related programs were established. The Solid Waste Program, which manages non-hazardous waste by setting criteria for landfills and disposal facilities and prohibits open dumping. The Hazardous Waste Program, which controls hazardous waste from cradle to grave, including generation, transport, use, and disposal. and the Underground Storage Tank Program, which establishes standards to prevent releases from underground storage tanks to protect groundwater. Two important things to remember regarding the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. It is a proactive program that focuses on preventing problems rather than fixing them after the fact, and it does not include contamination at inactive or abandoned sites. The Toxic Substances Control Act, which passed in 1976, gives the EPA authority to protect public health and the environment through control on toxic chemicals that pose an unreasonable risk of injury. The Toxic Substances Control Act gives the EPA authority to require reporting, record-keeping, testing requirements, and restrictions relating to chemical substances or mixtures. Certain substances such as food, drugs, cosmetics, and pesticides are generally excluded, as these are regulated by the Food and Drug Administration and the United States Department of Agriculture. The Toxic Substances Control Act addresses the production, importation, use, and disposal of specific chemicals such as polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, asbestos, radon, and lead-based paint. The Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, or Superfund, provides a federal trust fund to clean up uncontrolled or abandoned hazardous waste sites, as well as accidents, spills, and other emergency releases of pollutants and contaminants into the environment. This law is in response to events like Love Canal and Valley of the Drums. Under CERCLA, a tax is collected from all chemical and petroleum industries, and the monies collected from this tax is placed in the trust fund to provide cleanup for these sites. CERCLA gives the EPA the authority to seek out those responsible for any release and assure their cooperation in the cleanup. They will also clean sites when responsible parties cannot be found or when they fail to act. The EPA obtains private party cleanup through orders, consent decrees, and settlements, and recovers costs from financially viable individuals and companies once a response action has been completed. CERCLA also gives the EPA the ability to find those responsible and/or recover costs. The EPA can implement CERCLA in all 50 states and U.S. territories. Superfund, site identification, monitoring, and response activities in states are coordinated between state environmental protection agencies and waste management agencies. The map pictured below shows Superfund sites located across the country. The Resource Conservation and Recovery Act was amended in 1984 by the Hazardous and Solid Waste Amendments. These amendments focused on waste minimization and phasing out land disposal of hazardous waste, as well as corrective action for releases. The Hazardous and Solid Waste Amendments were developed in response to concerns about the hazardous waste leaking into groundwater. The amendments phased out land disposal, increased enforcement authority, created more stringent management standards, and expanded the comprehensive underground storage tank program. CERCLA was amended in 1986 by the Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act, SARA, which reflected the EPA's experience in administering the Superfund program during its first 6 years. SARA required the hazard ranking system to be revised to ensure that it accurately assessed the risk to human health and the environment posed by uncontrolled hazardous waste sites. SARA made several important changes and additions which improved how Superfund worked, how it interacted with states, citizens, and other regulations, and allowed for more money. SARA stressed permanent remedies and innovative technologies in cleaning up hazardous waste sites, and required Superfund to consider other state and federal environmental laws and regulation. In addition, SARA provided new enforcement authorities and settlement tools, increased state involvement and the focus on human health problems, encouraged greater citizen participation, and increased the size of the trust fund to $8.5 billion. In order to avoid instances such as the accidental release of methyl isocyanate in India that killed over 2,000 people in 1984, the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, EPCRA, was passed in 1986. This act focuses on the storage and handling of hazardous chemicals and is responsible for the requirements of safety data sheets. The Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, or EPCRA, allows the public a means to know what is happening around them by requiring emergency planning and community right to know reporting on hazardous and toxic chemicals. Community right to know provisions help increase public knowledge and access to information on chemicals at facilities, their uses and releases. The information can be used to improve safety and protect public health and the health of the environment. EPCRA requires facilities to have emergency response plans and report accidental releases or spills. The community right to know provisions require facilities that manufacture, process, or store designated hazardous chemicals to make safety data sheets readily available to state and local officials. CERCLA was amended in 2002 by the Brownfields Law, which provides tools and funds for both the public and private sectors to assess, clean up, and reuse properties that were at risk for contamination by hazardous substances. The Kentucky Brownfield Redevelopment Program, recognizing the fact that people were not aware of the benefits, processes involved in land revitalization, has developed quality educational services and one-on-one support for private and public entities wishing to clean up and reuse properties with an environmental past. The Kentucky Brownfield Redevelopment Program can offer the following services: free site assessments for local government, nonprofit, and quasi-government agencies, liability management and grant writing assistance, funding, information and education, brownfield inventory and property identification, and a help desk. This concludes today's module. The Kentucky Environmental Compliance Assistance Program hopes you have enjoyed the presentation, and we encourage you to reach out to us for any further assistance, not only with your waste questions, but any other environmental issues you may need assistance with. Thank you. Have a great day.